I think I'm a bootstrapper at heart. I mean, I think that I realize that capital, the best application of capital in a business is when you've got a working business model and you need to throw gasoline on the fire. When you say, gosh, you know, if I could get this in the hands of people all over the world, then this is going to be a really big business. That's when you need capital. You know, there's other areas where you need capital. I mean, if you're starting a business that is very capital intensive and you're not independently wealthy, like for example, if you want to start a restaurant like Tyson Cole did with Uchi, and it's going to cost you millions of dollars to build it, well, guess what? He went out and he raised money for that, and those investors did incredibly well. Some of those investors are friends of mine. They did incredibly well. That was one of the best restaurant returns, and it may be the best restaurant return in Austin history. But I think at my core, I realized that especially from the Coremetrics experience, that every time you spend a dollar, you better make sure that you're spending it in a high ROI way, that you're going to get a good return on that investment for yourself, for your investors. And so I'd say that I've blended the two approaches, and I think you can build a really big business if you blend the two approaches. Capital can poison you, it is true. If you take a lot of capital and you use that as an excuse, even if it's subconscious, to kind of take your foot off the throttle and say, wow, you know, we can get really nice office chairs and we can do this and that. And we've seen those stories, right? We've seen those stories in Austin too. Versus, we've really got to use this capital carefully. We've really got to get clients paying us. And so if you look at Bazaarvoice today has over 100 million in revenue. We spent around $10 million of investor capital to get to over 100 million in revenue. And that's something I'm really proud of, because there's very few software as a service companies or any businesses that get to that level of revenue run rate on that little capital. And so you could say we're mostly customer funded business, that we very early on created something people must have and got them to pay us up front and use that cash to plow back into research and development and growth. Yeah, I would actually say that the only way to learn as an entrepreneur is to actually experience it, to actually do it. You know, as Guy Kawasaki would say, don't worry, be crappy, just get started, in his great book, The Art of the Start. So you've got to jump in, and you've got to be unafraid, and hopefully you surround yourself by mentors who are going to catch you a bit when you fall and prop you back up. But that really is the way to learn. If you read a lot of books while you're doing it, it's even better, because it'll reinforce what you're learning as you go through the process. And sometimes you'll read something and you won't really get it, but then you'll get it, you know, about a year after, when you have more experience and you've made a lot of mistakes. So actually the best book on this whole concept is called The Bootstrapper's Bible, and it's Seth Godin's first book. And Seth Godin gave it away for free. He said, this is such an important book, I don't even want to make money from it. Everybody needs to, you know, he needs to give it to bootstrappers because they can't afford it anyways, right? And so that was actually the first book I read when I was starting Bazaarvoice. So Bazaarvoice, my current company, is the 5th business that I've started. Business being defined as the one for profit, as opposed to the internet game. And you know, the first 3 were all small bootstrapped companies. They were all companies in the e-commerce space. They were all companies that very quickly turned a profit. They had great cash flow, and they all had around 10 employees. My 4th company was the one where I went into, you know, quote unquote, the dark side for entrepreneurs with the venture capitalist for a company called Coremetrics. That company grew out of an e-commerce site that I had built and ran with my wife, selling sports nutrition products. And we needed analytics. I decided that was a big opportunity, a huge worldwide opportunity, and I wanted to run with it. I wanted to run with it fast. And we needed VC capital to do that, to be able to run with it fast. So it wasn't a business that you could bootstrap. And it really played out that way in terms of the players in the market. And that became a pretty significant sized company. There were a lot of hard knocks there because we raised money in 1999 and went through the downturn as all the dot-coms imploded and a lot of our client base went with it. And then we rebuilt from there, and today it's owned by IBM. Bazaarvoice being my 5th company, I took all those lessons learned of being, at my core, a bootstrap entrepreneur, starting out that way and always seen my parents bootstrap businesses. And then having that experience with VC capital and having too early timing with Coremetrics and going through that downturn. And we got really, really lucky with this business because our timing was perfect. When we started the company, there were only 3 retailers which had reviews on their site. Facebook was closed to the public and Twitter didn't even exist. So a lot of things came together at the same time to really birth this new industry of social. And today we're actually, I believe, the largest B2B company in the social space. I did pass up the chance to sell Coremetrics when it was a very young company. It was actually around 1 year old, and the first offer was $100 million, and I owned 75% of the company at the time. And I passed that up because I spent a lot of time with my mentor on the board of directors. It was actually a very small board. It was just me and one other person. He was a serial entrepreneur, a great guy. And I spent a lot of time with him, and he said, why are you really in this? Are you really in this to make money? Are you really, personally, are you really in this to build a great company? And that was my answer, because of course I was in it to build a great company. And so I said, that's it. I made the decision. Some of our employees that knew about it were horrified that I made that decision because obviously that would have meant millions for them as well. But we went on and obviously if I was able to predict that the dot-com bubble would have burst and we would have lost almost all of our clients and rebuild from there and all the pain that would go through that, maybe I would have thought differently in hindsight. But I'll tell you that I'm very appreciative today that I went through that experience because it makes me at my core who I am. And it really put this sense of fight in me because that company almost went out of business. So imagine going from, you could have 75 million in the bank to 0 and then rebuilding from there and then it eventually becoming one of the worldwide leaders through a lot of tears and hard work. I was having lunch one day with a friend, and this friend is a futurist. And I was showing him a really cool piece of technology that we had just developed for Coremetrics, my previous venture. And I was really passionate about it. And he stopped me at one point and he said, Brett, the cool thing about you is that you're actually creating the future. It's like, I can write about the future, but you're actually creating it. And if it wasn't for entrepreneurs, it wouldn't get created. And if you think about it, that's such a profound reason to keep going if you're down. And the value of persistence, the value of passion, of really going for it and really building a significant sized company, whatever that means to you. It could be 10 people. My parents wanted to build a small company, and they did, and they had a very, very good lifestyle. It was your typical lifestyle business. Or it could be that you have a dream to build, thousands of employee company and really have a huge impact on the world. Whatever your dream is, you should absolutely go for it because you will be creating the future and you'll look back in your life and you'll have no regrets. Even if you end up bankrupt when you're 55 and you've been starting company after company and it's just not clicking, you'll be one of the highest paid consultants. Because at that point, you'll know so much because you learn through both failure and success. Learning is experiential. So if you're thinking about giving up, go out there, seek the advice of mentors, really make sure what you're doing is something you still want to do. Make sure that your mentors and you think it's worth continuing. But if you make that decision that it's worth continuing, you have to go after it with all gusto.